Good morning to you. How you doing? Thanks for joining me. Hope you're well. Licorice all sorts weather-wise here in South Manchester today. It's looking alright now as I look out the window of the studio. Not too shabby at all. I suppose we can't complain after the Easter bank holiday weather, can we? I didn't come here to talk to you about the weather though. This is Sunday View, live right now on Fab Radio 2 here in Manchester, richieallen.co.uk, triggerwarning.tv and TuneIn Radio. Participate as we glance through Sunday's newspapers by tweeting the programme as usual. The Twitter handle is the same one it was last time. There you are.
Asking the questions mainstream journalists will never ask. This is your Richie Allen Show on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, and triggerwarning.tv.
Right, lots to talk about. I've been listening to the mid-morning talk programmes as well, and I'll be bringing you some samples, little bits of those programmes. It's Sunday View. Let's do it then!
It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Yeah, nice to be back with a Sunday View. I've had a nice weekend, nice and relaxing it's been thus far anyway. Yeah, it's April 28th, 2019. Halfway through the spring, are we? Or 1/3 of the way, I can't figure it out anyway. Right, I've not even got Twitter open, so I better do that. Let's get Twitter open there so I can see what you're telling me. That is if you choose to engage me this Sunday morning. While I do that as well, just a very quick glance at bbc.co.uk/news before we talk about the newspapers. London Marathon today, of course. London Marathon. A marathon, eh? You can barely manage 5 or 6 kilometres most mornings. One of the big stories breaking overnight is a story about a synagogue shooting in San Diego, California. It's getting an enormous amount of coverage this morning. Sky News earlier were leading with it, as was the BBC earlier on. Apparently, yesterday, a gunman fired upon people at a synagogue in California. One woman was killed and 3 others were wounded. There is a lot of coverage of this, and terms like hate crime being bandied around as well. An inordinate amount of media coverage given to this stuff by media organisations in the UK and in Ireland. This happened in California, halfway around the world. Is it worthy of, such ongoing media coverage? I would say it isn't. And I've given my reasons on that before. So that's a story that's in the news. Lest somebody say later on that I neglected to mention it or chose not to mention it. It's there. Right. Before I look at the papers, a couple of things caught my eye yesterday. And one of them was a story in the North Wales Pioneer. And it's about a homeless woman who was jailed in Llandudno for 6 weeks. She'd been caught begging on CCTV outside of a shop. There was no complaint made by any member of the public that the woman was harassing anyone. CCTV had captured this woman and she was arrested. She was already under a suspended sentence, right? A criminal behaviour order. She'd been suspended. She had a sentence suspended for similar begging previously, and she was banged up for 6 weeks. Now, I've been around a long time and I've covered a lot of things, and when you produce talk radio and television and news, your heart does become a little bit hardened. You're not as shockable, I don't think, as other people are. That's the lamentable thing, actually, that's what it does to you. You become a bit desensitized. But I'm going to say it, I was deeply saddened and depressed when I read last night that an English woman, a Welsh woman called Susan Piggott, 55 years old, homeless, and with apparently mental health difficulties, has been banged up for 6 weeks for begging. The prosecutor, Diane Williams, said that Piggott had asked for money and received it from 5 passers-by. So some passers-by thought, this lady is not well, she's obviously homeless, we'll give her a few bob. The defending solicitor, Nia Dawson, said that Susan Piggott is in poor health and there was no allegation of aggressive begging. Nobody had been harmed. There's no injury here. Nobody had complained about her, but she's been sent to prison for 6 weeks. I don't have to rant about this for anybody to understand the implications of this in the United Kingdom in 2019. Being poor and being without a home and asking for money for food is a crime. And earlier this month in the Guardian newspaper, to the credit of the Guardian, which I've often criticised, they reported on Melanie Woolcock from Bridgend in Wales, who was sent to prison for 81 days for not being able to pay her council tax. And the Guardian dug into it and found that there were 305 such cases in the last 6 years, people sent to prison for a civil matter, for the matter of not being able to pay council tax. Sent to jail. Paupers' prisons. Melanie Woolcock, 40 days in jail. She spent 40 days in jail, not the 81 days she was released. And now we have Susan Piggott, a woman with mental health difficulties, probably developed while she was on the street. I imagine it would drive anybody to lunacy. It would drive anybody to illness, to have to find yourself on the streets and not having anywhere to go and not having any money or any food. You know, it reminds me of many years ago when I was younger, finding out about the vagrancy laws in various states in the United States. I could never understand it as a young man. What do you mean? Somebody got sentenced to jail for 30 days because they didn't have more than a few bucks in their wallet. As a kid, I couldn't get my head around it. Here we are in the UK in 2019. We're putting women in prison. And you know what depressed me more than anything? And I'm a free speech advocate, and I've said this a million times. No matter what that free speech happens to be saying, I support it. So I'm not complaining about this. But there were one or two people on social media yesterday saying that, well, it's probably the best thing for her. And these weren't ironic comments, because I'm a very good irony detector. Not only were they not irony comments, but they weren't comments designed to trigger reactions. So it wasn't sarcasm. These were people who thought it's a good thing. It's a good thing. 6 weeks, put her in prison for 6 weeks, yeah. And what do you think about the privatisation of the prison service in this country, which is halfway there? Won't it be wonderful then, when corporations are controlling prisons from top to bottom, that you're sending people to prison because they can't put food in their mouths and they have to ask other people for help? Criminalise that. The corporations are laughing all the way to the bank. Let's have a look at the newspapers. The Sunday Observer leads with this. Corbyn launches bid to declare a national climate emergency. That's Jeremy Corbyn, obviously. Labour will this week force a vote in Parliament to declare a national environmental and climate change emergency. That's this week, right? Jeremy Corbyn has been meeting with Greta Thunberg, and he's enamoured of her, apparently. They're going to demand on Wednesday, Labour, that the country wakes up to the threat and acts with urgency to avoid more than 1.5 degrees centigrade of warming, which will require global emissions to fall by about 45% from 2010 levels by 2030. So they want to reduce global CO2 emissions by 45% of the levels they were in 2010. And they want to achieve this by 2030, and they want to reach net zero before 2050. Now, I'm not going to go into the catastrophic effects the attempts to reach these emission levels will have on the working class people of the world, yours truly included. Working class boy from Ballybeg in Waterford City, and proud of it. This is designed to wipe out the lower third of the world's socio-economic inhabitants, because that's how we're seen now, as numbers and as money. We represent a figure to the elites, the financial elites of this world. What this lunacy is designed to do is basically to kill the least off and the worst off of us. It is madness. CO2 is not driving warming on this planet. It's not. And Corbyn knows this. We'll come back to this in a minute. But now they're demanding a climate emergency is declared. Last night, Corbyn said the recent wave of protests were a massive and necessary wake-up call, says Corbyn. And we need rapid and dramatic action, which only concerted government action and a green industrial revolution can deliver. This is Corbyn speaking. Greta Thunberg welcomed this, and she's quoted in all the newspapers today. Yes, we do live in a lunatic asylum where the print media is quoting a pigtailed Swedish teenage girl who doesn't know her arse from her elbow, who knows nothing about climatology, geology or the environment, but now she's being quoted on a daily basis as if she's an expert. It's a great step, she said, because it sends a clear signal, blah, 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 fucking blah, blah, fucking blah, says Greta Thunberg. So there's Corbyn. His shadow business secretary, Rebecca Long-Bailey from Salford, was on Sky this morning with Sophie Ridge. Ridge asked her, does Labour's call for climate emergency declaration mean anything? That's what she asked her. Does Labour's call for climate emergency declaration mean anything at all, Rebecca Long-Bailey?
Well, we'd be the first parliament in the world to declare such a climate and environment emergency, but that's the first step in a long list of radical action that we want the government to take. We want them to take action that's commensurate with this national emergency, and in doing so, not just provide a better quality of life for people here and across the world, but also unlock the huge economic benefits that back in a green industrial revolution, which is what the Labour Party has been pushing for some time, and the economic benefit that that will bring to many of our communities right across the UK, through to manufacturing, all the way through to energy efficiency measures.
Because what I'm interested in trying to find out is what this actually entails, because it's easy to kind of talk in these grandiose terms about climate emergencies, but
it's very easy to talk about climate emergency in grandiose terms. Then Ridge does her job and she asks Rebecca Long-Bailey a good question about Heathrow Airport.
Emergencies, but it's much more difficult to take the quite challenging decisions that need to happen in order to bring, as Labour wants to see, carbon emissions down to net zero by 2050. So, for example, are you looking at things like the expansion of Heathrow Airport? Does Labour back that?
Does Labour back the expansion of Heathrow Airport? Good question. Especially for the shadow business secretary, right? What does she say?
Well, it's quite dramatic making this assertion on Wednesday, declaring a national emergency in relation to climate.
She loves to talk like this, Rebecca Long-Bailey, with a big mouth wide open, right, like this kind of a thing, and doesn't say very much. Answer the question about Heathrow, love.
Climate and environment. But it's necessary because from everybody from the Met Office to NASA to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has stated that if we don't take radical action...
What about Heathrow?
...action across the world, not just here in the UK, we're not going to be able to reverse the damaging effects of climate change, and we've got to bring our emissions down by 45% compared to 2010 levels by 2030 and to reach net zero by 2050, and that requires a national emergency, a mission, if you like, to unlock public investment but also private investment to get everybody in the UK behind this challenge.
Yeah. Ridge pressed her on the expansion of Heathrow Airport, but she wouldn't give a direct answer to the question. She could be the business secretary. Now, you know I'm no pro-business guy. Far from it. I'm not pro or anti anything. I'm just a curmudgeonly big old baldy bollocks with a big mouth who thinks that he's a socialist. She just ignored it, the business secretary. And the truth is, Labour, because Jeremy Corbyn won't be able to do anything about this, Labour will oppose the expansion of Heathrow Airport. Madness. And, Sunday View, we do an hour and we look at the papers. I can explain lucidly and intelligently, at least I think anyway, why the worst off in the world are going to be destroyed by this attack on carbon. I don't have time to get into it here, but I've done it on previous programmes. This is an elite agenda. It really is. And I'm just going to stop there, because if I start talking about it, I will just stay on it, and there's so much else we can talk about. This idea that we're going to reduce by 45% the emissions from 2010 and that we've got to do that by 2030. It's going to be so Orwellian what they're going to do in terms of getting you out of cars, in terms of encroaching surveillance on what you're doing in your home. It's unbelievable. Again, I've spent entire shows talking about this. By the way, the UK's shale gas commissioner is resigning after just 6 months. This is Natasha Engel. She's properly pissed off because fracking starts in a place and then it's got to stop because of tremors and mini earthquakes. And she's really cheesed off. She says that the fact that there's only got to be a 0.5 tremor, the fact that such a small tremor stops fracking, she says fracking is being throttled by this and I'm just giving up, I'm going to leave. And I love this because I believe fracking is devastating. In a million ways that I'm not going to get into because I've gotten into it before. Look at Frances Leader. Look at Tina Rothery. Great women who'll tell you what fracking would do to the countryside and to the environment. Devastating on a scale that most people couldn't even imagine. So I'm delighted that the campaigners against fracking have achieved as much as they have achieved. So she's properly pissed off. She's leaving and has written to the UK's Business Secretary Greg Clark saying that the government is pandering to the scare stories about shale gas extraction. Well, what the government has done is it said if there are tremors, fracking must stop. Full stop. I mean, you'd have to be an absolute mad woman not to want to stop fracking when there are earthquakes. I mean, why wouldn't you stop, Start your drilling and there's an earthquake a couple of miles away. Maybe we should stop, right? Right. Anyway, what does Rebecca Long-Bailey think about the resignation of this woman?
We want to ban fracking. We don't think that it's responsible for a government to lock the UK into another fossil fuel industry, quite frankly. Aside from the other, air quality concerns that many communities have, the potential for earth tremors, etc., etc. The list is endless. The overturning of local democracy, because many councils, let's remember, have voted against having fracking in their areas, yet they've been ignored by government. But we just don't think it's responsible to lock us into that fossil fuel related future at a time when we should be throwing our weight behind low carbon and renewable technologies.
Yeah, low carbon. The sad thing about this is Jeremy Corbyn, and this is where half of the listeners to this programme lose their collective shite and start abusing me, which is great. I love it. I have no problem with it. Jeremy Corbyn is the greatest liar that ever walked the face of the earth. At least as far as those on the left go anyway. He doesn't believe that carbon dioxide emissions are causing climate change. He doesn't believe this. And yet he will say whatever he is told to say by these progressive groups that are supporting him, like Momentum, and he will endorse their ludicrous declarations and proclamations, and he will embrace those as Labour Party policy, even though he doesn't believe it. I've had this out with his brother Piers Corbyn before. He doesn't buy into it, And there he is embracing the pigtailed wonderkind and photo opportunity, heaven for him, and declaring that we're going to have to declare a climate emergency. Again, see previous programmes for what that really means for the people that Corbyn claims to want to help the most, the underprivileged and the disadvantaged. This agenda, this war on carbon, right, on a naturally occurring gas that gives life to nearly everything on the planet but us, right, is somehow changing the climate to the point where in the mid part of this century we're all going to die. Bullshit. Right, on the front page of The Observer, because we're still on The Observer and it's already 19 minutes past the hour. Tech cuts off the young from adults, child expert warns. This is good. One of the world's foremost authorities on children's mental health has warned that technology is threatening child development by, and I quote, disrupting the crucial learning relationship between adults and children. I got into this in a roundabout way talking about old age pensioners on Thursday and what's being done to the elderly. So there is a disruption in the crucial learning relationship between adults and children. This is according to Peter Fonagy. At least I hope I've pronounced that right. Fonagy. Peter Fonagy. Peter Fonagy will say. He's a professor of contemporary psychoanalysis and developmental science even at UCL. And he's published more than 500 scientific papers and 19 books. He's warned that the digital world is reducing contact time between the generations. And that contact time is vital for the development of younger people and their minds and their understanding of themselves and the world that they'll grow into as they get older. So there's big disruption in the relationship between adults and children. The journalist Ella Whelan and David Willits, who's the defence editor for The Sun, were on breakfast television this morning with Sky's breakfast television with Stephen Dixon and Gillian Joseph, and they had this to say about it. This is good.
Peter Fonagy, who's a professor at UCL and a bit of an expert on this, says that tech is a problem with stopping young people from engaging, and we kind of all know that. But actually he focuses more in on the fact that in today's generation has less face-to-face time with adults. If you can think back to the kind of stereotypical situation of previous generations in which you might have social centres, be it the pub, be it community centres after church, something like that, where the generations would mix. And the argument he makes is that kids need that section of society that's older of them to get them to act a head taller. So what he says is kids who are just stuck on tech, interacting with each other and people of their own age, they're not being pushed to grow up, essentially.
Yeah.
And being around older people makes you kind of sit that 2 feet taller, sit up and want to aspire to be older. So he's saying that tech is part of it, but actually it's more just that face-to-face time with adults, which I think is growing less and less in terms of the generations just don't mix anymore.
I think you're right, and I just think social media is pernicious. I don't think there's anything good about it, but then I use it. But I just, I was talking to my wife about it the other day. Like my son will never know a time before social media. Like we have known that, so we can see the difference. We can compare it. We know what it looks like to go into, when you wouldn't go to a room and all the kids would be on their iPhones, that sort of stuff. But the next generation, they will never. That will be totally normal. Yeah. And of course, you can only benefit by interacting with people of the same age or other. But you learn so much by being with other people of different ages, and it corrupts that. I think being glued to a screen does corrupt that.
Nothing good about social media, said David Willits from The Sun. Peter Fonagy said, the psychoanalyst even, he said, my impression is that young people have less face-to-face contact with older people than they once used to. The socialising agent for a young person is another young person, and that's not what the brain is designed for. Very interesting. It is designed for a young person to be socialised and supported in their development by an older person. Families have fewer meals together, and people spend more time with friends on the internet. He said looser connection between children and adults had been happening since the Second World War, but it had become accelerated in very recent years. We tell them to get into a good university or their life is hardly worth living. We tell them it's all up to you, but we're not giving them a choice. We're not saying let's look at a number of career choices you could have or what you would enjoy. It's a difficult time for children. We don't appreciate it as much as we should. We should equip them better to be more resilient to the environment that they are under. And he said today's society is putting more responsibility on children to determine their future on their own without giving them the necessary support. Again, we've gotten into this many times on many programmes. Front page of the Mail on Sunday, exposed horror on lion farms. This is a year-long investigation by the Mail. They say it reveals a sickening trade, but it ends with a dramatic rescue, the investigation. Thousands of lions are being bred to be killed by hunters or slaughtered so their bones can be turned into medicines and sold for massive sums in the Far East. Some of the animals are shot in fenced enclosures by wealthy trophy hunters, including Britons. They pay thousands of pounds to kill the lions for kicks. Many more are trucked to squalid slaughterhouses and held in appalling conditions until they are shot in the head. The Mail on Sunday article says this is rife in South Africa, and it has been exposed in a year-long investigation by the Tory peer Lord Ashcroft, who accused the British government of being complicit in the trade because of its failure to ban the import of trophy skins. His expose ended in victory as one lion was rescued from death at the hunter's hands and released into the wild in joyous scenes last night. This was apparently streamed live on YouTube and on the Daily Mail's website. Here's Lord Ashcroft speaking on that YouTube channel.
The captive or can-lined industry is truly barbaric. Rarely, if ever, has any species of animal been so exploited. I call on the UK government to follow the lead of other nations, notably the US, France and the Netherlands, in banning the importation of captive lion trophies.
Yeah, it's a pretty dark story, that 54 lions killed at one slaughterhouse in 2 days. The skins are smuggled into America via Britain. They're hidden inside deer skins so that customs officials don't know. They're being bred in captivity, lions and tigers being crossbred to squeeze greater profits from the bone trade. And they highlighted one case where a city worker, a London city worker, paid thousands of pounds to shoot a lion with tranquilizer darts. The lion, called Simba, was at the centre of the probe by Ashcroft. The creature was bred in captivity and touted to foreign hunters looking for prime specimens to slaughter. But this is the lion they rescued yesterday. You have to be sick beyond anything that you or I can understand to want to kill a magnificent animal like that, just to shoot an animal dead. Why would you want to do that? You can't tell me that there's two arguments, there's two sides to that story. There isn't. You're sick. There's something very wrong with you if you want to travel to Africa to look at an animal like that and shoot it and watch it struggle and die and then skin it and take what remains of it back to England or the United States. It's sickening. That's the front page of the Daily Mail. Also in the Mail, the Sunday Mail I should say, also in the Mail is this story. Now, UKIP candidate who said he wouldn't even rape a Labour MP says it's okay to sexually abuse boys. Is that right? I don't know very much about this guy. This is Carl Benjamin, who had, or has, I should say, a YouTube channel which is under the name Sargon of Akkad, which must mean something to people who, I don't know, read comic books or read Tolkien, or I have no idea what it means. But anyway, this guy's a YouTube sensation. I suppose, again, fulfilling the prophecy of Andy Warhol. Everybody will be famous for 15 minutes in the future. This guy was the guy who said he wouldn't even rape Jess Phillips. And he said that she was behaving like a moron or something to that effect, so he decided to behave like a dick. All right. I have no comment on any of that. I've no interest in it. What I am interested in, though, this guy's standing for UKIP, and they are alleging that he has said that it is okay to sexually abuse boys. Now, I don't know whether this guy said this or not, but I would doubt that he said. I would be very surprised if this guy said that without having heard the YouTube video. I couldn't be arsed. There are 100 million YouTube accounts. Some of them with 100,000 subscribers, some of them with 1 million. Do you know what they've all got in common? They're all crap. They are crap. They are the inevitable result of YouTube and other video sharing websites and communities. The shit rises to the top. That's what it was always going to give you. Social media and YouTube. It was going to give you millions of moronic, loud-mouthed. Yes. I know, I could be talking about me too. No, but that's what you're getting with these accounts, right? Did Carl Benjamin say that he thinks it's okay to sexually abuse boys? I would doubt it very much. But they're saying that he did, and they've quoted him. In a YouTube broadcast, Benjamin says, I can be quoted as saying, you can, F-U-C-K, young boys, it's actually not as controversial as you think. Depends on the child, doesn't it? The ancient Greeks were pederasts. It was considered to be normal. It was mentoring. So this is a dossier that's been handed to the UKIP National Executive by a UKIP member. So UKIP members are pissed off at the fact that Tommy Robinson is associated with UKIP, even though Robinson can't become a member of the party. They're properly cheesed off that this guy is not only now a member of UKIP, but he's standing in the European elections for UKIP, these European elections which will take place towards the end of next month. So they're saying that he says you can abuse young boys, but he said it in a stronger way. It's not as controversial. The Greeks did it. It was considered to be normal. It was considered to be mentoring. So they got in touch with him, the Daily Mail or the Mail on Sunday. And he said to them that it was an abstract conversation and that the Daily Mail or the Sunday Mail is a dirty, dirty smear merchant. And he confirmed that he believes the age of consent should be 18. So it was taken out of context, he said. It was an abstract conversation. You're a dirty, dirty smear merchant. But I suppose if it isn't edited and he said, uninterrupted, if he said, I can be quoted as saying, you can screw young boys, it's actually not controversial, depends on the child. The ancient Greeks were pederasts, it was considered to be normal, it was mentoring. It seems to me that this guy, Benjamin, again, who I know very little about, is, well, he's nothing new, is he? He's basically just a shock merchant, is he? We've had these throughout the history of broadcasting. People who say things. We've had Howard Stern, haven't we, and people like that. Of course, Howard Stern, far more sophisticated, it would appear, than this guy, who seems to make his corn or earn his crust by saying very controversial things. And that's why I'm not interested in him. But the problem with that is when you say stuff like that and you don't explain what the context is, or you don't take the time to explain, well, this is what I'm actually trying to achieve by saying that it is okay to screw young boys. The problem is it comes back to bite you on the backside, doesn't it? Anyway, UKIP didn't respond to a request for comment on this last night. Sunday Express, Tories to lose 1,000 seats. This is in the local elections, because you've got local elections next month as well as these European elections. This is about Brexit. The Sunday Telegraph headline is ignore spy fears over Huawei, says China. Well, they would do, wouldn't they? This is about the controversy about the British government getting Huawei, the Chinese tech giant, to take some part in rolling out 5G, the mobile network here in the UK. Big controversy over that last week because the Telegraph learned about this before anybody else did, because the National Security Council, which meets once a week, met to talk about Huawei, and somebody present went to the Telegraph and spilled the beans. Well, the Chinese ambassador is writing in the Telegraph today. His name is Liu Xiaoming, and he said, don't listen to the Americans, don't listen to anybody else. Huawei is a good company and will do a good job for the UK. He advised, did the Chinese ambassador, not to give in to protectionism. The last thing the world needs is discriminatory measures towards companies involved in 5G, he said. Protectionism. That's a good question. Why isn't there, or is there, or was there, a company in the United Kingdom who could roll this out? This, of course, shouldn't be rolled out. It's obviously lethal and deadly and has profound consequences, will have profound implications for human health in this country. I don't agree with 5G, obviously. But if you're going to do it, why do you need to get a Chinese company to do it? The Sunday Times has on its front page, Cash for Lords crackdown in new Cold War. This is a funny story. The House of Lords, unelected peers, the average age, of course, of a peer being older than that of an MP in the lower House of Parliament. Peers are being criticised for taking money from Russia and China, because there are lobbying firms working for Russia and China, and they are using members of the House of Lords. They are working through the House of Lords to get things done, right? Ministers are to launch a sweeping clean-up of public life in an effort to stem the tide of red money from Russia and China. You see, members of the House of Lords don't have to declare any contact with any lobbying organisations from Russia or China or anywhere else. This is going to be mentioned in the Queen's speech, right? Again, this is down to the Huawei story, of course, as well. This weekend, Ben Wallace, the Security Minister, warned action was needed to change parliamentary rules to ensure transparency in our political system in order to safeguard British democracy against hybrid attacks by hostile states. There was an investigation that found that 7 members of the House of Lords had business interests linked to Russia, and some had made public statements in support of Moscow. So they keep mentioning Russia, they keep mentioning Moscow, and they keep mentioning Beijing. But they're not mentioning Israel. Strangely enough. No mention of Israel. It's maddening, isn't it? We can go after members of the House of Lords because they have tenuous links to companies in China and in Russia. But whatever you do, don't ask about Israel. Don't open your mouth about the Zionists. I would imagine that there are far more links between members of the House of Lords and Israeli companies and Israeli subsidiary companies and Israeli members of Parliament than there ever have been between members of the House of Lords and Russian and Chinese companies. But don't mention Israel. There's a big story. At least I think it's a big story. I found this last night and I tweeted it out. You are with the Richie Allen Show, by the way. Sunday View, live on richieallen.co.uk. Fab Radio 2, triggerwarning.tv. There are lots of comments coming in. Let me read some. A lot of comments about the imprisoning of people who found themselves to be homeless or people who can't pay their council taxes. Lot of people commenting on that. To see what they are tweeting, go to twitter.com, put Richie Allen Show in, all one word, press enter. Hi to Paul, hi to William, hi to Rich Mortimer, hi to Richie. Richie, he says, Sargon's story, this is Carl Benjamin, is fake news and has already been debunked. No, it hasn't. No, it hasn't. He did say, I'm reliably informed by people I trust, not producers of my programme, but other producers, that he did say the thing about young boys and sex. Now, I don't believe he meant it. For a minute, I don't believe he meant it. But he did say it. So don't say it's been debunked, my friend, because it hasn't been. He said it, and even though he didn't mean it, you've got to own it. It's as simple as that. People are horrified by the thoughts of child rape and sexual abuse against minors. Horrified by it in the current climate. And if you're going to say that, you're going to have to put it into the context with which you mean it. Now, if you're only saying it because it gets you thousands of followers, because you're the big Larry guy who says whatever he wants to say, well, that's okay too. Make that clear. But when it comes back to bite you on the arse, don't cry about it. If you're going to say this sort of stuff to shock people and to amaze people and to thrill people and to get moronic people to watch your YouTube videos, go ahead. But when you do, own it. It's as simple as that. Like I said, I don't believe he meant it, but he did say it. So there you are. Hi to Gail. Hi to David. To Base Ninja. To Samantha Jordan, who says, we always sit around our table at dinner time, Richie, as a family. It's very important, says Samantha. Good for you, Samantha. Phones get put away. Good quality family time. I believe that Graham Booth, who's broadcasting, or will be broadcasting just down the road from me a little bit later on, will be on triggerwarning.tv with his own unique take on the stories of the day with the real Sunday View, apparently. That's triggerwarning.tv just after noon. Check out Graham Booth. He's a funny guy. He's got some interesting opinions as well. And I like listening to him. So check him out. That's our Graham Booth. That's our Graham with that quick reminder. Hi to Dean Smith as well. Right, I'm going to move on. Lots and lots of tweets and comments. Hi to Hayden Hewitt, who might be listening this morning as well. This is a good story. Oklahoma grandfather who claims a drug for dogs cured him of head-to-toe cancer is tumour-free 2 years after doctors gave him 3 months to live. Now, I've heard of pancreatic cancer, which is terrible. I've heard of lung cancer, which is equally terrible. I've never heard of head-to-toe cancer. I thought the headline in the Mail on Sunday was brilliant. Head-to-toe cancer. That'd be a bad doctor's visit, wouldn't it? Doctor, lay it on me. You've got head-to-toe cancer. Everywhere. Even in my fingernails. Everywhere. Even on my coccyx bone. Even on your tailbone. You've got cancer everywhere. Head to toe, I said. What do you not understand about head to toe? You stupid Irish bastard. All right. Head to toe. Right, so it's serious stuff, this. This is Joe Tippins from Oklahoma. He was given a diagnosis of late-stage small cell lung cancer back in 2016. That's a death sentence, right? By January 2017, it had spread through his entire body. He was given 3 months to live. Doctors enrolled him in a clinical trial. They said the clinical trial might give him a year longer. But a veterinarian contacted him, honest to Jesus, and he said, try the dog deworming drug fenbendazole. Fenbendazole. Try that. That has shown cancer-fighting properties in cell studies. By May 2017, old Joe is completely clear of cancer. This is not a joke. Here's Coco 5 News out of Oklahoma with the story. Coco 5 News. It doesn't get any better than that. They might give me a job.
When you tell someone that a medicine for dogs cured your cancer, you better be ready for some skeptics. But Joe Tippin says it did save his life and others. And now even cancer researchers are open to the possibility it might be true.
My neck, my liver, my pancreas, my bladder, in my bones, it was everywhere.
2 years ago, Joe Tippin says he was told to go home, call hospice, and say his goodbyes. The doctors were unanimous. He was going to die of small cell lung cancer.
Once that kind of cancer goes that far afield, the odds of survival are less than 1%, and the median life expectancy is 3 months.
Tippin says he went from 220 pounds to 110, but that was January of 2017. Today, Tippins is very much alive, and what he credits for his survival has doctors scratching their heads and the rest of us raising eyebrows.
About half the people think I'm just crazy, and half the people want to know more and dig deeper.
Tippin says he got a tip, not from a pharmacist, but a veterinarian. And in his desperation, he turned from people medicine to dog medicine, specifically fenbendazole, or what you give a dog when it has worms.
Truth is stranger than fiction, you know.
Just 3 months later, Tippin says his cancer was gone.
Wow. So what about the medical profession? Stephen Prescott is the president of the Oklahoma Medical Research Foundation, and he's very, very interested in this.
I'm usually skeptical, and I was and maybe still am about this one. But there's an interesting background to this.
Cancer researchers like Stephen Prescott are skeptical, but they also are not dismissing this anti-parasitic's potential. He says Tippins is not the first person to potentially benefit, and maybe not the last.
Scientists at many credible places have done work on this for years.
But was it the dog dewormer, or was it something else? Tippins took the dog medicine with daily vitamin E supplements and CBD oil. He was also taking an experimental cancer-fighting drug. But Tippins says out of the 1,100 patients on that clinical trial, he was the only one cleared of cancer. Tippins says he was saved by the dog dewormer, and he plans to take it for the rest of his life.
Well, my insurance company spent $1.2 million on me with traditional means before I switched to a $5 a week medicine that actually saved me.
Prescott says he's now working with Tippins to organize a case study.
We're going to do it and see if we can confirm that in a very rigorous sort of clinical study sort of way that these patients had that kind of response.
As for Tippins,
I've got now over 40 success stories other than me.
He's sharing his story on an online blog that has already been read more than 100,000 times. Most of the feedback, positive or curious. Some, though, accuse Tippins of giving cancer patients false hope.
How do I answer that? I mean, if I've saved one other person other than me, it's worth it.
Well, he's not giving anybody any false hope. He's just telling his story, isn't he? Really interesting that he took cannabis oil and vitamin E as well. And he says you can rule out the clinical trial because the clinical trial was of 1,100 people and it didn't benefit anybody else. He was the only one who, you could make an argument showed any improvement. But his improvement has been total. Parasite treatment for dogs, fenbendazole, $5 a pop. And what's really important, if you read the full article on the Mail Online, is that veterinarians have been talking about this for quite a while. And others saying that this is, it does really attack cancer cells, this stuff. And I just find it incredible. When I tweeted this out yesterday, somebody did saliently, I thought, point out that, well, Richie, can you trust this? Because if there was any truth in it, would this have been allowed to come out? I don't know, you see. You see, this guy, Joe Tippins, He didn't tell anybody, did he? He went online and did his own Facebook pages and did his own blog. Maybe it was difficult to prevent it from coming out then. I don't know. I think it's fascinating. I really do. I think it's definitely worth looking into. You couldn't be telling anybody, listen, take this and it will cure your cancer. But you know what? If you have late-stage cancer, and I hope you don't, I hope I don't have any listeners who are struggling with anything like that. But if you do, that treatment is not going to do you any harm. Why not? I would say, why not? But don't listen to me. I'm not a medical expert, nor am I a medical professional. It's 14 minutes to the top of the hour. I'll give it another mention. Graham Booth, mouthy, sweary little mank, will be live from midday on triggerwarning.tv with the real Sunday View. On triggerwarning.tv, check it out. It'll be on YouTube as well. It'll stream there, and Graham engages as best as he can. It's not always easy when there's a lot going on, but like myself, you try and read out as many comments as you can. He does a lot of engagement with his viewers, so check that out at midday. I like Tucker Carlson on Fox News. I like him. Don't panic. I like him as a presenter. Up to now, anyway, he's proven to be consistent in interviewing those with whom he disagrees. And that's something pride comes before a fall. I'm proud of it. I've always been like that. I'll have anybody on my programme, regardless of what I think of what it is they're saying. So I think he's a free speech advocate. But to be fair, I've never heard old Tucker go after Israel. But anyway, you can't have it all. He was a guest on another Fox News programme over the weekend, and he was being asked to run the rule over the Democratic Party presidential candidates. And the chat threw up some interesting things. One of the people he spoke about was Andrew Yang, who's a Democratic candidate for the nomination for 2020. He's not got a prayer's chance in winning, Andrew Yang, but he's an interesting guy. Now, in an interview with the New York Times, Andrew Yang said this: all you need is self-driving cars to destabilise society. Right? In just a few years, we're going to have 1 million truck drivers out of work who are 94% male, with an average level of education of high school or 1 year at college. That one innovation, he goes on, will be enough. That one innovation, he goes on, will be enough to create riots in the street. And we're about to do the same thing to retail workers, call centre workers, fast food workers, insurance companies and accounting firms, because artificial intelligence programs are going to replace call centre workers all over the world within the next few years. Same for fast food workers. Same for insurance companies. You ring up the Norwich Union or Linea Directa, Direct Line, or whoever the hell, right? It won't be a person you'll be speaking to. And Andrew Yang is saying this is going to collapse society effectively if something isn't done about it. Now back to Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson is impressed with Andrew Yang because he's also worried about artificial intelligence. He doesn't know too much more about Andrew Yang's policies, but he likes this. He likes the fact that Andrew Yang's coming out to talk about AI and automation. Tucker Carlson.
I mean, I don't agree with everything he says. I don't know all of his views, but I can't think of many more people on either side who are thinking more deeply about what the actual problems are. Automation, by every estimate, will eliminate a huge percentage of jobs in the United States at exactly the moment when we're importing millions of new people every year to fill jobs that probably won't exist 3 years from now or 10 years from now. It's lunatic, and nobody's saying anything about it other than Andrew Yang. I'm not sure why it's falling to him, but I don't care. I want somebody to tell the truth about it.
So you're worried about the jobs, not this whole AI worry that people have, like the robots are going to come eat us and kill us.
Well, I think there's no question that...
Or is that a problem too?
Oh, it's a massive problem. Of course.
Get in there, Tucker.
Of course, because anybody running a business wants to eliminate labor costs, or reduce them to the extent possible. That's the imperative of the market. There's no sin in that, but it's real, and we can't pretend otherwise. And so we often will say, we need more workers for agriculture. It's like they don't know anything about agriculture, actually. Very few parts of the ag economy aren't automated now. No, it's a completely real thing. By the way, lawyers, physicians, Huge sectors of white-collar America are about to be overturned by AI, and nobody is talking about it because Russia!
I refuse to see a robot doctor. I'm just going on the record with that. I will not have my temperature taken by a robot.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, good for her. She won't see a robot doctor. I won't see a doctor, full stop, but there you are. Super soldiers and AI doctors. Brilliant answer Tucker Carlson gave when she said, so you're not worried about robots coming to kill us and eat us and all that? He said, well, of course I am. And I've had a lot of guests on talking about this, and I suppose I can summarise this because this is very serious. If you're listening to this programme and you're new to it, you might have heard of DARPA, which is, I suppose one way of describing DARPA is to call it a think tank for the Pentagon. But it's much more than a think tank because it researches and also develops these crazy ideas like super soldiers and all the rest of it. And DARPA is developing technology that merges minds and machines together. And this isn't new. It's not news. I haven't just discovered this overnight. I know that you know this, but a lot of people don't know it. And the technology is basically brain chips, electrodes that are implanted in brains that can receive electrical signals from and then send them to your neural tissue, your real brain. Right. And what does DARPA say in the Pentagon? Oh, don't worry about this at all. This is really benevolent stuff. It's really about helping folks walk again. Paralysed people, for example, making a recovery where they could control computers and control robotic limbs with their minds. Don't worry about it, says DARPA. There's a couple of journalists that have done amazing work on this. Mainstream journalists. Not truther industrial complex heroes, but mainstream journalists have done some brilliant work on it, including a guy called Rafi Kachadurian. Great name, Rafi Kachadurian. He should have a radio show. Kachadurian. Rafi Kachadurian has been following this, and he's been writing about Andrew Schwartz, who's beloved by companies like DARPA. So what has Andrew Schwartz been doing? Well, he's a brain implant researcher. And back in 2012, this guy, Andrew Schwartz, put some implants into a woman called Jan Scheierman. And Jan Scheierman was paralysed by a neurodegenerative disorder. So what did Andrew Schwartz do? Well, he put implants in her brain. And she was able to eat a chocolate bar with a robotic arm controlled by her thoughts. Yeah. So these journalists like Kachadurian have been researching these brain chips, and they are writing this year that this stuff has now been militarised. So they tell you about Jan Scheierman. Wonderful, she could eat a chocolate bar with her mind, controlling the robotic arm. But the journalists are going, well, hang on a second. And they're finding out that really it's been militarised. And another DARPA contractor called the Applied Physics Laboratory has been carrying out experiments using Jan Scheierman, this same woman. And she's been able to control an F-35 flight simulator with her thoughts. So they love this stuff. So they've ordered more flight simulation research. They want to get them to control drones with their minds. A drone controlled by your mind, just by thinking about it. Right? Where the hell could that possibly lead? So this guy, Rafi Kachadurian, has been raising the possibility that brain chips can also be used to control as well as empower implantees. Well, of course, if you can put a chip in somebody's brain and that person can move things with their mind, well, surely you can also control that person because you've got access to that chip as well. And the noted historian Christopher Clark has written this. Clark writes, in future wars, a metabolically dominant soldier who enjoys the benefits of immunity to pain, reinforced muscle strength, accelerated healing, and cognitive enhancement will enter the battle space neurally linked not just to his human comrades, but also to swarms of semi-autonomous bots. It's hard not to be impressed by the inventiveness of the weapons experts in their labs, underground labs, he writes, but it's also hard not to despair at the way in which such ingenuity has been uncoupled from larger ethical imperatives. uncoupled from larger ethical imperatives. Ethics doesn't even come into it. And these super soldiers that Tucker Carlson said he's very worried about ultimately will not be used to fight proxy wars. They won't be needed to fight proxy wars. They will be used to control any semblance of uprising among the peoples of the world in the countries we inhabit right now. That's how I see it. Forget about James Cameron's Terminator, especially the opening sequences of Terminator 2. You know, machines fighting machines, maybe. No. You won't have the machines of Russia fighting the machines of the United States. You won't have the machines of China fighting the machines of Israel. No, you won't. You'll have these semi-autonomous bots and super soldiers policing your communities. Christ, when you look back at Paul Verhoeven's film RoboCop, was it Verhoeven who made RoboCop? Maybe I'm wrong. I know he made Basic Instinct as well. It's all coming to pass, while people are blissfully unaware of it. Of course, the immediate future of millions upon millions upon millions of people finding themselves not only without a job, but no other career to sidestep into. Cataclysmic consequences for the life of human beings on this planet, of course. But super soldiers. Tell you what, we'll leave it there. Before we go, though, and I must apologise for not having a Sex Pistols track to go out on. I can't find one. I could, but I'd be off mic then. I don't have time to do it. But I want to give a shout out to Dave and to Nathan of the absolutely sensational Sex Pistols experience. They're off to Whitby, lovely place, for a gig tonight. The Sex Pistols experience, absolutely amazing, brilliantly reviewed. I've not seen them. I can't wait for the next time they're back in Manchester. I'll be there. For sure to meet the lads whom I've met before at events before, but to see them live, by all accounts, they're incredible. The Sex Pistols experience, travelling en route to Whitby, and they're enjoying the programme. Thanks for that, lads. Have an absolutely stonking gig later on tonight. Shame I don't have any pistols to go out with. Right, that's it for the programme today. Let me just remind you that if you jump over to triggerwarning.tv or go to the Trigger Warning channel on YouTube, Graham Booth, that sensational, of the most sensational of broadcasters, will be giving his own inimitable take on the Sunday news with his programme. Get over there and check him out. Now, you and I will speak again tomorrow, Monday at 5 p.m. UK time. Until then, it's goodbye from me. Look after yourselves and one another. Closing out with the Smiths. This is a How Soon Is Now. That was Sunday View. I've been Richie Allen. See you tomorrow. Bye now.